ahead and get started because we have some fantastic content to cover today. Thank you all so much for being here on this Friday. The Behavior Analysis Student Organization is so pleased and honored to have Dr. Doug Carnine here. You own Dr. Doug Carnine here today. I could go on and on about this man, but I am going to let him just jump in because I've seen the slides. He's got a lot of good stuff to cover. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming Dr. Doug Carnine.
Those of you who know about direct instruction will be surprised when you see that I'm working from the script. So I'm honored to be here today, and what I'd like to do first is have everybody turn and wave hi to Wendy. Say Wendy, she's there behind the computer. You know who Wendy is? That's why we're here today. We're here about the youth today. We're going to grow up and be the leaders of tomorrow. So I'm a professor emeritus at the University of Oregon, and during my 35-year career, I taught about, educated, conducted research on, and advocated using direct instruction principles to design math, science, literature, and history programs. These were all programs designed to serve vulnerable children, poor, handicapped, English language learners, and children of color. So after retirement, I shifted my focus of direct instruction to teaching about the benefits of mindful kindness to adults, and I used my book, How Love Wins, The Power of Mindful Kindness. That's what I'll be drawing on mostly today. Near the beginning of the resource section of your handout is a link to an article where I explain how DI design principles form the foundation of this book. So, I use this book now to teach skills and attitudes to those who are privileged like myself, and to those who are vulnerable like my co-authors of my other book, St. Badass, Personal Transcendence of Tucker Maxwell. 3 of my co-authors are convicted of murder, were sexually abused and physically and verbally abused as children and grew up to be abusers themselves. They will spend the rest of their lives in prison, and yet transform themselves through the practice of mindful kindness. As I will describe later, the changes mindful kindness brought to my murderous co-authors are dramatic. In addition, some privileged individuals working through How Love Wins have had some life-changing experiences as well. These changes prompted me to help form a Spreading Kindness campaign, and our focus is on making Eugene a city of kindness, which is why I have the signs and bumper stickers and kindness cards and a sign-up sheet over here. The idea is to start building, this will be a multi-generational effort, to create greater prominence about kindness in our thinking, in our discourse, in our media, and in how we judge and direct our own lives. The last page is actually the handout is the homepage for the website we're developing. We'll take a look at that. So I've made several presentations and conducted 3 study groups with the intent of motivating my audiences to increase their acts of kindness. Unfortunately, the hour allotted to my 5-lesson presentation does not allow us to go through these motivating and inducing exercises I value. So instead of changing your behavior, I hope to change your thinking about the central importance of kindness to our personal and public lives. Toward that end, there'll be 30 minutes set aside at the end of my presentation for you to ask questions. My personal act of kindness is to stay up here so you won't catch my flu, which I'm recovering. So, why should we care about kindness? In my book, How Love Wins, I share what I've learned from science, religion, and personal experience about how kindness makes our life more purposeful, healthy, and happier. So, for me, it has to do with how I treat myself, my relationships, how I deal with the others. And the others is in quotes because these are the groups that are typically outside our comfort zone. Different races, religions, educational levels, gender, sexual orientations, nationality, political beliefs, and economic levels. And also criminals, the homeless, those with mental illness, the dying, and the disabled. Sharing the gift refers to how we pass along to others the importance of learning about mindful kindness and acting in that way. I'm going to start with a personal story about Jeremy. I first met Jeremy when I was a hospice volunteer spending time with individuals who had 6 months or less to live. At age 35, Jeremy was already very sick with advanced ALS and had a traumatic life. He ran away from home at age 13 because of the debauchery of his mother. And later, near his death, his estranged wife would not allow his 11-year-old daughter to visit him on his deathbed because he had taken a 3-year intensive training in yoga, and his wife was a very, very devout Christian. Because he was on hospice and in other ways had been traumatized, I assumed he would be self-absorbed with his personal problems. He was traumatized. I'm assuming his relationships are not okay. I'm assuming he doesn't care about others, and of course I didn't think he would think much about sharing the gift. But the intensive training he received taught him about mindful kindness and changed the way he approached the fear and pain that came from his illness. By the time I met him, he was completely paralyzed below the neck. He had no use of his body. The only thing he could do was turn his head to look at me. He operated his computer with voice commands. He consistently focused on how to be kind to others who came to visit him, and never a hint of self-pity or discouragement. He radiated contentment and joy. He talked about how blessed his life was, his gratitude, and about the wonderful friends he had at the care facility. The employees at the care facility would spend their breaks sitting with him, just so they could bask in his compassion and kindness. Another hospice volunteer called and said, "Can I go sit with Jeremy just so I can be close to him?" Of course I said yes. I didn't know him. This is Jeremy a few weeks before his death. He told me that he thought his life was like a drop of water. When the river came to a waterfall, many drops separated, each reflecting light a little differently according to its nature. At the bottom of the waterfall, his drop would simply be reunited with the river and flow on. Everything is part of me and I am part of everything, he told me once. It does not make any difference what kind of water drop you are. You can be any shape, size, or color. You and I are all the same, and I am you, and you are I. I last saw him on a late Saturday afternoon. Later that evening, Jeremy told me a nurse told me that he had been ready to go to sleep and told her to bring his nightly medicine, and also told her he would die that evening, which he did. So what turned out was that Jeremy's relationship with himself was excellent, his relationships were excellent, how he was concerned about others, and did a terrific job sharing the gift. So the point that I'm going to make in his example and my prisoner friends is people who have what we would consider to be the most desperate of lives can deal with those situations through mindful kindness and transform their lives. And if they can make those changes, surely those of us who with privilege can do the same if we're so motivated to. So regardless of what your interest is here, I'm going to try and convince you that the path to a healthier, happier, longer life is revealed actually through science. I've read hundreds of scientific studies about kindness, one of which was conducted at Harvard University on adult development. The study sought to find out what makes for a happy, healthy, long life, and some experts were surprised by the findings. Close relationships, more than money or fame, are what keep people happy throughout their lives, the study revealed. Those ties protect people from life's discontents, help to delay mental and physical decline, and are better predictors of long and happy lives than social class, IQ, or even genes. Well, what happens without close relationships? Wallander, the chief researcher, said, loneliness kills. It's as powerful as smoking or alcoholism. A recent study found that 2 in 5 Americans feel like they, quote, lack companionship, that their, quote, relationships aren't meaningful, and that they are, quote, isolated from others. Moreover, the younger generation is lonelier than the older generation. So, to develop and maintain close, caring relationships is both life-saving and life-enhancing. But how do we create close, caring relationships? The answer from science seems too simple: kindness. I want you to take a moment, and by kindness I mean the quality of being friendly, giving, and considerate. Take a moment to remember an important kindness that you either gave or received. I want you to recall that memory. You can close your eyes if you want. And I particularly want you to be aware of the emotion associated with that memory. That positive feeling comes from the good chemicals, we might say, the neurotransmitters your body produces that reward us for giving and receiving kindness. I'm not going to have time to talk about it today, but kindness is one of our 4 basic instincts, and therefore this is not something that we need to learn to do, but yet we have to learn to release it and act on it and cultivate it. I actually define kindness quite broadly, including feelings of compassion, forgiveness, empathy, and gratitude, along with actions of generosity, altruism, and cooperation. Kind habits are important in all our relationships, not just with our partners, also with friends, family, colleagues, pets, and even the environment. In a famous study, Professor John Gottman and his research team at the University of Washington interviewed and observed 130 newlywed couples over a weekend as they carried out their everyday tasks such as cooking, cleaning, listening to music, and talking to each other. Gottman was able to accurately predict in 4 out of 5 cases whether those couples would be together 6 years later. Gottman's findings about the importance of kindness and the damage of unkindness to the stability and satisfaction of a marriage has been replicated with straight and gay couples, couples with and without children, rich and poor, as well as violent and nonviolent individuals. So, kind habits is the key to close, caring relationships, which is the key to a happier, healthier, and longer life. What does kindness look like in Gottman's research? In its simplest form, one partner initiates a connection, the other responds with kindness. That could mean feedback in the form of asking to hear more, agreement, making an encouraging comment, or offering interesting, relevant information. For example, if one partner comments during a conversation about an interesting passage in a book, the other partner might ask to hear more. Here are other examples. Giving the partner the benefit of the doubt. For example, if your partner is late, do not interpret it as a lack of caring or respect for you. 2, being extra considerate when your partner is having a hard time. For example, when your partner is discouraged and overwhelmed, you offer to carry out some of your partner's responsibilities. 3, sharing joy. When your partner accomplishes something, you take time to genuinely discuss how wonderful the accomplishment is, and be gentle in conflict. Avoid criticism or blame, and instead focus on your needs. Gottman stated, quote, for the hundreds of thousands of couples getting married each June, and for the millions of couples currently together, married or not, the lesson from the research is clear. If you want to have a stable, healthy relationship, exercise kindness early and often. The couples who were still together after 6 years responded to each other with kindness almost 90% of the time. The ratio of negativity to positivity is 1 to 5. So for every negative interaction, there were 5 positive interactions. In contrast, the ratio in failed marriages was 1 to 0.8. Basically, for every negative interaction, there was not even quite 1 positive interaction. Note that being kind does not mean couples will never disagree and argue. The key is to be positive while arguing. Here are some of the ways to be kind during conflict. Instead of blaming by saying you never help around the house, focus on what you need with I statements. For example, the house needs cleaning and I would really appreciate some help. Avoid statements of you never or you always. Remain positive in conflict by listening to your partner, friend, relative, colleague without criticizing, becoming defensive, shutting down, or acting superior. Handle conflict with mutual respect, humor, interest, openness, and acknowledging your partner's ideas or feelings. Nonverbal communication also plays an important part in fostering kindness. Partners who have been together for a long time, in the research, they picked couples where one of the partners was in pain and actually demonstrated that by holding hands, it decreased the pain of the partner who was in pain. It also led to synchronicity in breathing and cardiac events. So the acts of kindness affect our emotions and our physiology, as the research and much other research has shown. Because kindness is so central to long-lasting, loving relationships, it should not come as a surprise that kindness is primary in finding a partner. In Love Factually, author Joanna Welch lays out in clear detail how a person can systematically and successfully search out and vet a new loving partner. What are the non-negotiables? She wrote, quote, "If I had to summarize over 60 years of excellent relationship research in one sentence, that sentence would be, quote, if you could find and be with someone kind and respectful, your relationship will probably work. And if you can't, it won't." The kind habits critical in finding a suitable partner and then a loving relationship after that, and enrich all our relationships with friends, children, parents, and co-workers. I want to talk just for a minute about kindness in religion. It's central to all religions in some form of the golden rule, although a friend told me that there's a better rule. It's called the platinum rule. It says, do unto others as they would like to be treated instead of how you would like to be treated. But anyway, for many people, the motivation to be kind comes from their religious beliefs. For Christians, kindfulness can be seen as an important way to glorify God, as explained in a very practical way by Candace Cameron Bure in her book, Kind is the New Classy, The Power of Living Graciously. For Buddhists, kindfulness is central to the Bodhisattva vow. Sharon Salzberg has written several books about kindness from a Buddhist perspective. Judaism has chesed, a Hebrew word for kindness or love between people, a piety of people towards God, as well as love or mercy of God towards humanity. In Islam, kindness also plays a central role. Quote, what actions are most excellent? To gladden the heart of human beings, to feed the hungry, to help the afflicted, to lighten the sorrow of the sorrowful, and to remove the sufferings of the injured. Many of my prison friends who've worked through the exercises in how love wins are devout Christians, Muslims, and Buddhists, but many are not of any religious faith. Fortunately, no particular belief is needed to benefit in your learning about mindful kindness. In my book, what matters is going through the exercises. They're designed to help the reader become more mindful kindness, and as many readers have noted, quote, the exercises are not just helpful, they're critical. Here's an example of one of those exercises. And as I said, we won't have time to go through these today, but I'm going to illustrate a few of them just to show you the kind of engagement that you would be involved in if you were going to do this as a behavioral change activity. Okay, mindfulness helps us all win love. Let's talk about mindfulness. Awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment non-judgmentally. The practice of mindfulness often arouses feelings of calmness and peace. So what I want to do is do a guided meditation activity to try and give you a little taste of that. Some of you probably already are meditating and practicing mindfulness, just in case. So one of the importance of mindfulness is it allows us to see beyond our biases and our prejudices so that we can accurately see what people need so we know how to be kind to them. It also gives us a rest from our negativity. And just as resting our body refreshes us, so too does resting our mind. A resting mind is a happy mind, and a happy mind can be a kind mind. Okay, earlier I asked you to experience your feelings associated with a kind act. Now I'm going to take you through this guided meditation. So sit erectly, comfortably. Put your hands in your lap, please. Close your eyes. Inhale deeply, and exhale completely. Totally focus your attention on your breath as you inhale and exhale. Now relax your forehead. Relax around your eyes. Relax your cheeks. Relax your shoulders. Feel your body resting on the chair. Are you making contact with the chair? Feel your feet resting on the ground. Visualize a place that gives you joy and contentment. Smile. Spread that smile throughout your body. Visualize a person who has given you kindness or received kindness from you. Smile. Spread that smile throughout your body. Keep that person in mind as you say to yourself, I am grateful for the kindness we have shared. Open your eyes. Turn to your neighbor and smile. Hopefully the calmness from this guided meditation was refreshing. In contrast, if you are self-absorbed, meaning you're caught up in your worries and wishes, your attention is directed inwardly. It's all about you. No time to smile at your neighbor. And if you are caught up in your own opinions, then you are more likely to be judgmental of what your neighbor might say or do. Mindfulness frees us from the habits that keep us from taking better care of ourselves and being kind to other people as well. I like to use the word kindfulness to describe how we combine being kind with being mindfulness. In mindfulness, it's how we can be in the world. Kindness is what we can do in the world. Our kindful actions benefit us and at the same time benefit the receiver of our kindfulness. Everyone wins, both the giver and the receiver. That makes kindfulness one of life's biggest win-wins. It's essential for genuine love, but love is a feeling. Kind action habits prove that the feeling of love is genuine because we walk the talk. It's important to know that kindness and mindfulness must go together. Many people practice kindness by volunteering, and numerous studies have shown that volunteering and altruism offer powerful benefits. Sarah Conrath and her research team investigated 50 years of data on more than 10,000 Wisconsin residents, beginning when they were high school students. They found that the people who volunteered lived longer. But in fact, when they looked more closely, they found that only people motivated by altruism benefited from volunteering, as opposed to selfish motivations like wanting to build up a resume, impress friends, or convert others to beliefs. The selfish volunteers didn't reap the same benefits as those who volunteered out of altruism. In fact, the selfish volunteers died at the same rate as the non-volunteers. In short, we benefit from acts of kindness only when our intention is to genuinely contribute to the well-being of the receivers of our kindness. This concern for the suffering and misfortune of others is compassion. So, how love wins is about compassionate kindness, not selfish kindness. When you see the words kindness, remember it always means compassionate kindness. I'm going to quickly go through what it looks like to be a kindful practitioner. And basically what it means is that you use compassion and mindfulness to bring about the kindful practitioner, which means you renew and then serve. And renew is when you take care of yourself, and serve is when you help someone else. So here's an example. You've got a partner, a wife has a difficult and frustrating day at work and calls to ask you to take a half-hour walk before coming home. As a kindful practitioner, you encourage her to take the walk and go ahead and start preparing dinner. So, taking a walk, the wife renews herself. After her walk, she takes over dinner preparation. She's serving. Then she gets to spend some time with her daughter. That's renewal. And then she returns to cleaning up the kitchen and serving. So I'm going to read a letter from a good friend of my wife, Linda, at her time of death. She was in hospice. And she talks about how she serves to her visitors and how that also renews her. After a recent stay in hospital where I endured a rather traumatic event involving a cranky update, I was glad to arrive at Creekside Hospice for a relaxing 3-day stay. The facility was lovely, like a luxury hotel, and the staff was very friendly and accommodating. I was finally able to get a good night's sleep and was feeling quite normal. One day, the Creekside hospice chaplain came by and asked if she could visit with me. I didn't feel particularly in need of spiritual guidance, but it occurred to me that the chaplain, who only wants to be of help, is often rebuffed by patients who can't be bothered. Everyone needs opportunities to perform their job, so I agreed to have a chat with her. I explained at the outset that although I'd been raised a Presbyterian and still believed in God, I had recently found comfort in the teaching of Buddha and tried to follow those teachings in a way of living. I also told her that I was by nature a cheerful person and that I was completely accepting of my terminal diagnosis and only wished to enjoy what life I had left. I may have said all this because I didn't want any mournful expression of sympathy from a stranger. But that was not the case. Beverly seemed relieved that I had started the conversation and took up the challenge of meeting me on my own terms. We had a very pleasant conversation, especially about the difficulty of forgiveness, and fell to providing each other with favorite quotations. My favorite was, hanging on to resentment is like eating rat poison and waiting for the rat to die. Hers were more of a biblical nature, but nonetheless true and helpful. I think we both felt satisfaction with the encounter. The next day I had 2 visitors. Carl was a gentleman who, as a healthy senior, wanted to give back in some way, and so was volunteering simply to chat with patients if they wanted company. He arrived at the same time as Jay and his therapy dog. I had expressly asked for the therapy dog, but saw no reason why we all couldn't chat together. Again, Carl was trying to be helpful and only needed someone to accept his help. As I had with the chaplain, I told Carl and Jay that I was accepting of my diagnosis and was trying to be upbeat and cheerful, and so no pity was needed, a relief for everyone. We had a lively conversation, and when he got up to leave, Carl said, "Margaret, I'm going to remember you. Look at you, you're all smiles. I hope I'll be like that." After Jay and Carl left, I thought about how beneficial all 3 visitors had been to me when I permitted them to help me. I also felt good about the kindness I had shown them in taking the time, allowing them to give their gifts. I think there is a great deal of kindness in the world, and that one must only be open to the idea. So, this is an example of one of the key questions. Why might you want kindfulness to be a primary purpose of your life? So, what we're going to do is, in the direct instruction tradition, are you ready? Answer the question, why might you want kindfulness to be a primary purpose in your life? Go.
Having kindfulness as a primary purpose is a powerful way to foster the well-being of all of us.
So what I'd like you to do now is take a minute to, we skipped that one. Go ahead, one more. Go ahead. I'd like you to turn the kind habit self-assessment in your hand out. We're not going to have time to do it. The purpose of this is people need to reflect on how they're kind. And they need to be thinking about how they can become more kind. And so the purpose of this assessment is to stimulate your thinking about your kindness. We don't have time to do it now, but if we were doing it as a behavioral change activity, you'd be discussing the answers in a small group setting. Lesson 3, what are we going to do about our unkind habits? I want you to recall a memory of when you were unkind, when you were cruel or selfish, insensitive, insulting, condescending, any of those. I want you to think of that. Close your eyes. I want you to bring that memory to your mind. And I particularly want you to evoke the feeling associated with your unkindness. How did you feel when you acted in that way? Okay, thank you. That unpleasant feeling comes again from neurotransmitters, punishing us for unkind acts, and possibly an unkind habit. An unkind habit is a regular behavior or tendency etched in our brain that is cruel, inconsiderate, or causes harm to oneself or others, whether intentional or unintentional, and whether it involves mental or physical activities. My co-authors of Say Badass are experts in unkind habits, and eventually they did transform them and became kindful practitioners. I've included in How Love Wins largely unedited quotes about their kind and unkind habits. The first excerpt I'm going to share comes from Tad. He's the artist of the Circle of Art Piece that you see there. And if you'll notice, see the red there? That's a postmark. And that postmark says Tucker Maximum Security Prison. Next slide. That's become the cover of the book. So how did that happen? Do the next slide. This is the art piece that you saw. They wouldn't give him art supplies. So what he had to do was create the pieces of art one at a time and then mail them to me. And then I scotch taped them together. Since they wouldn't give him art supplies, in his later work where he used color, he used Skittles, M&Ms, coffee, and blood to give him the colors he needed. So Tad wrote this about the unkind habits of his stepdad and how these unkind habits led him to develop his own unkind habits. One day I was about 13. I was outside mowing the yard. My stepdad and mom were fighting, which led them both outside. I stopped mowing to watch them. My mom was screaming, saying, "Don't walk away from me." At one point, my stepdad punched my mom in the face. He was choking her out. When I decided I had enough, I went and found a 2x4 about 4 foot long. As he was choking my mom out on the ground, I came up behind him and hit him. I was aiming for his head, but I hit him on his shoulder. He jumped up looking at me like he was going to kill me, but he didn't. He looked back at my mom, then took off, got in his truck and left. He came home later that day, but you know, Mom and I came up with a plan to kill him one night when he was asleep. But she backed out of it at the last minute. I was all for it though. Basically, she was going to drug his food with sleeping pills, and I was going to stab him to death. You can say that was an unkind moment. We all have our problems we deal with. Most of us, fortunately, are not traumatized in that way, but I have had, still have to some degree, but it's much less, an anger habit. I learned how to recognize when anger was rising in me and to shift my attention to my breath, like we did in the meditation exercise, allowing the stirred up emotions to settle. But earlier, I tended to be an angry person when I got upset. So, for example, one day I spilled dry dog food on the floor, big carton of it. I looked down at the mess, and it made me furious, so I kicked the carton, swore, slammed the door shut. So, several years ago, after I'd been practicing mindful kindness, I did the same thing. Dry dog food was all over the floor. But, because of my mindful practice, I stopped, and that's the key to your unkind habits. You have to interject a moment of hesitation so you don't automatically go into the habit. And what I did was I looked at the floor, and I realized that if I kicked the carton, the mess would be bigger. Kicking the carton wasn't going to fix the problem. And I didn't kick the carton, and I was so relieved not to go through the emotional upheaval of having a tantrum. It's hard to be truly motivated to change unkind habits if we don't allow ourselves to experience the hurt they are causing ourselves and others. It's experiencing the pain we are causing that motivates us to change. Practicing mindfulness gives us the clarity to see that pain. When I would swear and slam a door in anger, I was so focused on myself that I never noticed the look of fear on the faces of my wife and daughters. I also noticed that I used anger to control their behavior. For example, after spilling something, if I got angry enough, Linda might offer to clean it up just to calm me down. Once I became more mindful, the shock of seeing how I was hurting and manipulating my family was very sobering and was a strong motivator to get me to change. So what does science show about the unkind habits in disaster relationships? The most unkind habits, the number one is contempt. That's the most devastating. The others are criticism, defensiveness, and stonewalling, where you withdraw or shut down a discussion. Disaster couples disregard the kind acts of their significant other and instead respond for an unkindness. For example, if the wife says, Ellen gave me some pea seeds that are working really well for her, the husband might reply, it will take more than new seeds for you to grow anything. Contempt almost ended my relationship with Linda when we first met, because I was very judgmental, and if she said something I didn't agree with, I would, in front of others, say something about how I strongly disagreed with it. Linda's a very strong person, though, so it was clear to me that we weren't going to be together very long if I didn't change that habit. Fortunately, I did very quickly, so we've been married now for 47 years, and I'm grateful that she shaped me up on that. Another telltale disaster sign is a lack of interest in the success of the partner. If one person mentions being honored for volunteer, the partner might ignore it or display a lack of interest by deadpanning, good for you, while continuing to read the newspaper. So, now I want us to look at our own kind of unkind habits. Again, go to your handout. Now, I don't know how to explain this, but I've got a lot more in the handout on unkind habits than I do unkind habits. I think we all need to think about that. Maybe it's just not me. Again, we don't have time to use this as a behavioral change exercise. But I gave it to you as a handout in case you wanted to do a little reflection on your own. I particularly like the unkind personality types. It's probably clever by half, but it's based on the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th Revision, DSM-5. So what I did was take out the behaviors that could be looked at as unkind, but not necessarily tied to disorders. So this is a toned-down version of 6 of the 10 types in DSM-5. This is an example again of another exercise that we don't have time to do. The kindful vow for how love wins. Okay, this is the kindful vow for how love wins. I intend to be mindfully kind to myself. I intend to be mindfully kind in all my relationships. And I intend to be mindfully kind in reaching out to the others. And then we also make the vow to share the kindness. Okay, contrasting lives of privilege with a life of trauma. This is Roy, I mentioned earlier. I started corresponding with Roy in 2009. This is when he went into prison 20 years ago. He's an inmate at the Tucker Max Unit, the notorious Arkansas maximum security prison that was a setting for the fact-based Robert Redford movie Brubaker, with its torture telephone and 200 unmarked prisoner graves. Roy was writing my daughter Leah and asked if she knew someone to answer his questions about Buddhism. Leah asked me, and being a Buddhist lay minister, I agreed. Little did I know that agreeing to write him would end up with us writing St. Badass, Personal Transformation in Tucker Max Cell. I'll begin with some quotes from my co-authors of St. Badass about prison life. Go back to prison life. John wrote, quote, breakfast is served at 3:30 a.m., lunch is served between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m., and dinner between 2 and 4. Then we starve until breakfast. Cody had to ask for a segregated cell because a gang was attempting to murder him. Cody wrote, quote, we had 5 people die here last week from smoking K2. A young man who did not have much more time was the first to die at 2:30 p.m. The officer was feeding chow, and when she got to his cell, he was on the floor. I watched them carry him out. Made tears come to my eyes. You would think that everyone seeing that would not want any more K2, but wrong. The user went right on buying more K2. If it was not for the guards, there would be no K2 drugs, green money, cell phones, or anything illegal. Just yesterday, I received this letter from Don, who said, there are so many K2 deaths, but I'm so depressed that I can't finish this letter. When you are transferred to another prison for security reasons, you are given no notice. The instantaneous transfer means that a prisoner will not be allowed to say goodbye to friends he might have had for 10 or 15 years and will never be able to write them because letters between prisoners are not allowed. Stephen had glaucoma but was treated in prison with the medicine the ophthalmologist had prescribed. Then they decided to stop giving him the medication for several years. Recently they started giving him the medication again, but it was too late. He will go blind. Cody's only child was born after he entered prison in his late 20s. Until Cody dies, maybe 50 years from now, he will never be able to hug his daughter or even touch her hand. Tad wrote, quote, "One must always be mindful in here. I witnessed a man being beaten because someone scuffed the guy's shoes by not watching where he was going. Then I saw a man get his throat cut because he stepped in front of another man. And here it is very disrespectful unless one says, 'Excuse me.'" John wrote, quote, this is a good one for this group, "Just got off behavior control. What they do is put you in solitary confinement with your boxer shorts and one blanket with the blowers on full. That's all you get, nothing else. No beanie, no shirt, no socks, no shoes, nothing, no soap, no toothpaste, no cups. Nothing for 72 hours. I bundled up in a ball under the side of the concrete table wall and let the air flow over the top of it." So what we've got are situations where the physical world of many prisoners, before they go to prison, is traumatic. And in their early life and in prison, they develop unkind action habits. In their mental world, similarly, because of the trauma and the crimes they commit and the other things they do, they develop very unkind mental habits. So I'm going to talk now about Roy's life in a little more detail. To say he was difficult is an understatement. He experienced repeated sexual abuse and physical abuse at the hands of his father throughout his childhood, and his mother did nothing to protect him. Here's some of what he wrote about his life. Quote, "My father was explosive in a 24/7 kind of way. Any little thing would set him off, and there was no telling what he would do, how far crazy he was going to get. He threw a running chainsaw at me one time and kicked me through a screen door twice. He tore off the door to our refrigerator, and me along with it because I'd been holding the door open for a second too long. And he went up to kicking me inside of it. Then for my 9th birthday, he started the sex bullshit. Yeah, my crazy life and actions were directly influenced by my childhood and its craziness. It will kind of screw up your head a bit, especially when dear old dad doing that to you and not curbing his violence. And my mom, her attitude was pretty much, quote, 'Just don't bother me, okay? How do you let your husband do that kind of crazy shit to your son?' My father put whiskey in my bottle to keep me quiet when I was a baby. All my uncles and cousins on both sides were alcoholics and drug addicts, so I was drunk all my life. I could hold some booze by the time I was 12 as well as dope. I did my first shot of meth at age 9 or 10, and you name it, I wanted it. I stayed high and drunk, and could function, so to speak. I worked hard, did good, and got good grades in school. From there, we went on to a life of crime. So it's easy to see why the background of a person so much explains why we have so many people in prison today. After murdering his parents, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Go ahead. So, I just want to take a second to talk about our habits, because our physical world is unimaginably different from Roy's and these other co-authors in my book. So in our physical world, we make decisions about what our actions are going to be, our habits. And in our mental world, we make decisions about our mental habits that we create. And those are going to determine whether the kind and unkind habits, how they're going to come out, and whether we're going to have close caring relationships, and how that's going to affect us having a healthier, happier, and longer life. So now I want to change, and I'm going to skip another exercise that we don't have to do. We're going to go back. Another quick mindfulness skill here. Linda and I went to Myanmar, Burma in 2013 and volunteered to spend 2 weeks at a Buddhist monastery helping monks improve their English pronunciation. I would ask each monk to answer a question in English with intensive practice on their pronunciation of the answer to this question. What do you do when you notice you are distracted during meditation? They offered many answers, but most were a variation of this. Quote, note that your mind is thinking, then return to observing the rising and falling of your abdomen. In the time we were there, Linda and I must have heard that response about 200 times, and it affected our meditation. And now my meditation practice often involves physically being aware of the rising and sinking of my chest and abdomen as I breathe. This was a surprise portrait that they gave me at the end of our volunteer time, and they also did one for Linda. So let's do a brief meditation. I'm not going to guide this one like I did earlier. You're on your own this time. Close your eyes. Start paying attention to the physical sensations of your breathing, particularly the movement of your chest and abdomen as you inhale and exhale. If you notice your mind wandering, just return your attention back to the physical sensations of the rising and falling of your chest and abdomen. We'll do this for 1 minute. Okay, let's come back to the room. Personal experiences convince us of the power of kindness. I want to talk about how Roy changed. It was in prison that Roy became interested in Buddhism. Then Roy and I formed a Buddhist kindfulness partnership, which benefited both of us. It may sound strange, but I think I have learned as much from them as they have learned from me. He gradually came to recognize that practicing kindness and mindfulness was essential to forgiving himself and attaining some degree of happiness. He wrote extensively about the power of kindfulness and how it transformed his life. Quote, old man Cornbread is about 65 and has been here 29 years. He has no one, no family that cares enough to send him a mere postcard. He loves to walk. The shoes the state furnishes wear out quickly. To get another pair is such a hassle. We bought a used pair of tennis shoes for $7, and I cleaned them up and traded $1 for a pair of insoles for them and gave them to old man Cornbread. When we gave them to him, I thought he was going to cry. He put them on right then, and it was like he was walking on air. He had a big smile all over his face and was bouncing with every step. We did good. Happiness from helping people is a good kind of happy.
Mama.
You know, I'm sure, the look. It shows when you help someone and they appreciate your help, especially someone who rarely receives any kindness and who is basically ignored in life like he doesn't matter. Well, we're showing some of these guys that some people do care about them. From another letter. The key to less pain and suffering for anyone is to focus on others. Damn it, it works because I use it daily. Just getting folks to really try it though ain't easy, because most everybody is so used to thinking about self only. Quote, this is somewhat surprising. Being molested for a number of years, he actually saves the life of a child molester. Quote, much as I used to hate child molesters called chomos in prison, one time the guards put one in with us. When I realized what was up, everything went deadly quiet. Psycho Mike and Hackett Jack were getting their shanks off the top of the ductwork in the bathroom, and I knew they were fixing to pop more holes than a sieve in this little geeky nerd-looking dude and slice him up. So I got off my bed, went straight at the dude. When I got in his face, I said, you sick chomo maggot piece of blankly blank, I'm going to kill your blankly blank ass, and slapped him. But cut my hand right before it connected so it would pop loud and sound like I really hit him harder than what I did, and said under my breath, run for the door, they're going to kill you. And he did just that. I acted like I tripped and couldn't grab him fast enough. They locked me up for 30 days for assault, but I didn't care because those two killers would have killed him. As much as I hated child molesters, I still didn't want him to die. I even looked proper in the other inmate's eyes because I attacked him first. Sometimes Roy's acts of kindness surprise me. Quote, "I'm back here in the hole for a noble reason, I think. I was escorted by 2 police guards when a cricket was trying to get across the hall. With the stormy, rainy day, the bugs and critters are stirring around in prison. The guard on my right, a troubled, very unhappy, hateful individual, was going to stomp on this cricket. No way in hell was that going to end up. I shouldered his cruel ass against the wall and said, 'What the blank is wrong with you trying to stomp that cricket? How'd you like it if a big SOB stomped on you?' I almost got my ass kicked, but it would have been worth it. Later, I found the Buddhist precept for saving my cricket friend. Quote, 'Should you see a worldly person intent on killing an animal, attempt by appropriate means to rescue or protect it and to free it from its misery.' That guard was intent on killing my little critter friend, so I used appropriate means." But then he wrote me a few months later. "The night before last, I woke up to a cricket singing in my cell. It was so awesome. For about an hour, he just played the sweetest tune. I cried some joyful tears, my friend, and I know it was a thank you concert for saving my little friend a few months ago. Talk about a smile in my heart. He laughed and went down the tier, stopping ever so often to play some sweet music, then moved on. Very cool. There's joy everywhere." Well, I benefited from meditation and mindfulness. Quote, "This is one of those rare quiet times in the block. The guys just got through watching some DVD movies and now they are over and the TV is off. No one is hollering or being loud and rude. It's a precious time. While I was meditating, the silence became so loud it broke through my letting go. Have you ever experienced being in the zone, that beautiful, still, empty place where there's nothing messing up your preciousness of awareness? You feel like you're shimmering within a shimmering existence. It's like looking across the salt flats in Utah in the blazing heat and seeing the heat waves in the way they really don't have any form. Then poof, you're back in the moment and you see solid forms. You're back to reality, but it's a reality easier to deal with since I've experienced that special place of stillness with the heat waves. Because of that, my life in prison stopped being miserable. It didn't matter any longer that I'd never be physically free again." So this is the surprising, where you have this horrible physical world, Roy's world, and yet you have kind action habits. And he was able to change his mental world and develop these kind mental habits. So, our second and last chance to do the I. I'll do the question, you do the answers. Here we go. What are the benefits of having mostly kind habits? Having mostly kind habits contributes to close, caring relationships that in turn contribute to a long, healthy, and happy life. What does mindfulness mean? Paying attention to our intention in the present moment, being non-judgmental, and free of distracting thoughts. Why is mindfulness important? Mindfulness brings us peace and joy while enabling us to be more genuinely kind to ourselves and others. Why might you want mindfulness to be a primary purpose in your life? Having mindfulness as a primary purpose is a powerful way to foster the well-being of us all. Now here. Want to turn the lights down? Okay, that's it.
All right, so now if we have any questions, it's a good time to ask some. And I have a question, then I can start off. So you mentioned with your wife getting your behavior shaped, and then in the prison they have you to talk to. Do you think if you want to practice mindfulness, it's good to also have a partner in that in terms of being transparent, or even like if you wanted to collect data on yourself, talking with someone through that or having some accountability?
Yeah, I think it's helpful, and in a sense, it's inescapable because you're going to be interacting with people, and it's just a question of whether you want to be explicit about what you're doing and what you're working on, and whether they can give you feedback and support. What I found in the study groups that I do, about 95% of the time is spent in small group discussion on these behavioral change findings. And people who are strangers form relationships quickly because they're talking about things that are central to their life. They're talking about how they want to change their life. They're talking about things in their lives that are going wrong and they need to change. And so to have a community or a partner or someone on this journey is extremely helpful.
I have one more question. Do you find, especially when you're holding these groups or different articles that you've been reading in your research, that the social construct of this idea of kindness is different or vastly different, or there are central themes like you were talking about it across the religions?
There's some cross-cultural differences in kindness. I don't think they're particularly significant, in part because, as I said, kindness is one of our 4 basic instincts. So it doesn't matter where you are around the world, what culture it is, what race you are, it's part of your DNA. So that commonality is always there, even though there's some variations in cultural expression. The problem we have is we're in a very individualistic, materialistic society, and there's the other 3 instincts, according to this one analysis: reproduction, success, and survival. So sex and success are very important in American society, and they get a lot of play because they can be monetized. You can sell things around them. Kindness isn't that attractive in a corporate sense because it's free. You can't really sell it. You can't really buy it. So we face the challenge of how do we, that's why I was saying at the beginning, how do we create a culture of kindness? The project that I'm involved in, making Eugene a city of kindness, is actually growing out of work that's been done by the mayor in Anaheim, California. He ran on a platform of kindness 8 years ago, and they started doing things like changing the role of the policeman around drugs so that instead of arresting people for using drugs, they refer them to treatment. The schools took on the initiative of generating 1 million acts of kindness. The Dalai Lama has visited Anaheim 9 times in 3 years. The mayor, Tom Tate, he spoke with us for an hour recently. He's going to talk to our Mayor Lucy about kindness, and he's going to come to Eugene and speak as we try and move this campaign forward. He's done an incredible job, and when we were talking to him, what he said over and over and over again is, this is cultural change, this is cultural change. We talk about it all the time. And that's what we're competing against, because we're in a society that's talking about things related to sex and success. And so how do we get more, quote, airtime for kindness? How do we make that more prominent? How are we going to make that more common? Well, some ways we're going to do it is have people put signs in their yard, or stickers on their car, or take these free cards and leave them when you go someplace, at a restaurant, at a grocery store. You've got to see it more. You've got to make it more prominent in your consciousness. And I don't think I need to say why we need this. All you have to do is read the newspaper. So it's not a cultural change that's going to happen in my lifetime or my children's lifetime, or I mean, if we're lucky, it'll be 5 lifetimes, if we're lucky. It may never happen. But we're in this struggle around these 4 basic instincts in terms of which ones we're going to promote and elevate and guide ourselves personally and as a society. Yes?
You mentioned the 4 basic instincts.
Mhm.
I thought it was really interesting how survival and kindness could be kind of pitted against each other. So when we play upon people's fears, it really cancels out kindness, and so kindness is almost like an active way to combat that fear. It's hard to be kind when you're afraid.
Yes, it's true. And that's one of the reasons why in the work with these prisoners, my estimate is there are only about 5% of the prisoners who are interested in making this change. And the reason is that you can take a malady like cystic fibrosis or something from birth that impedes a person's life. If an individual is raised in a traumatic environment, there are actual physiological, anatomical changes that are as damaging and can be as enduring as a physical disability. So we have this problem of helping people who have been seriously damaged and are in fear. And in fact, the single most important thing in dealing with someone in trauma is allowing them to have a sense of safety. What this means is, what the world's greatest proponent of is right here, Tony Biglan, is prevention and nurturance. We have, the point is not to help Roy after he's murdered his parents. The point is to get to parents, and we know how to do this, and change their lives so that kind of stuff happens much less. It's all about prevention.
So with that 5% of inmates population that you're talking about, did you find like any successful strategies to kind of like get buy-in or build that like initial relationship?
Yeah, I use a strategy called Each One Teach One, and that's basically how it's the way of sharing the gift of mindful kindness. So for example, Roy introduced Mike to mindful kindness, and then Mike introduced mindful kindness to Roger. So Roger writes me and he says, I decided to confess to you. I've molested 100 children, and I want you to help me never get out of prison because I'm an uncontrollable pedophile. And the only way I can be kind is to spend the rest of my life in prison. So there are these ways that this, call it a ripple effect, each one teach one. There are systematic effects that are much more important, and Tony just sent me an email today about work that's being done with, I mean, I haven't even had time to digest this. I'm the president of the board of the nonprofit Generation PMTO Parent Training Model Oregon. Very, very successful at preventing child abuse, reuniting families. A recent study in Kansas with 800 families, randomized control design. The parents who, all of these families had severely emotionally disturbed children that could not stay at home. They were all in foster care. So of the parents that we completed the training were reunified with their children on an average of 350 days earlier than the control group. So there are massive changes that can be made if we put into effect this. But anyway, the email that Tony sent me was about someone who has taken that work and is applying it in prisons, which I'm very excited about. As I said, he just sent me the email today, so I haven't even had time to digest it. But the thing about Roger, what happened was I had to negotiate, this just shows you our legal system. he was going to be released in Arkansas, but most of his crimes were committed in the state of Washington. So he wanted me to talk to the prosecutor's office in the state of Washington. I contacted the state of Washington. I was in contact with the prosecutor's office. And they said, well, there's just really nothing we can do. And I said, wait a minute. This guy's going to be released. He's saying up front he's going to be a pedophile, and you can't do anything about it. So we went back and forth, and then finally he emailed and said, okay, we're going to put a hold on him, so we'll extradite him. So that means he'll never be free from prison. But he's in prison, and he's introduced How Love Wins to 7 other prisoners. And, yeah, these people's lives, for us, fortunately, are unimaginable. He had me try and find his father, who's in prison. And we found his father, and we sent a letter from him to his father. Never met his father, and his father refused to write him back. So, just one hardship after another. Any other questions? Yes?
I was wondering if you have thought about how you could adapt these lessons to a younger population, or if you're planning to move to try to work with maybe like juvenile offenders or something like that in the future.
I'd like to see it happen, but it's probably not anything that I will do just because of time and lack of means of doing so. I mean, I would be fascinated about it, but it's something I'm not going to do.
I'm taken by your poster note. Did the person collect all your envelopes and draw them and then mail them separately, or did they do it one at a time?
I think they had to do it, they had to at least do the adjacent ones together. They have to.
I'm saying that, but
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Yes.
So sometimes we can be stubborn people. How have you found to kind of combat or deal with the resistance that people might have around like mindfulness? They might say things like, oh, well, that doesn't work for me, or I've tried that and it didn't work, and they're kind of not open to that idea. How do you help support them or kind of guide people through maybe a process of finding some success?
Well, the first thing even before that is that what I'm interested in is mindful kindness. I'm really not interested in mindfulness by itself. The reason is that mindfulness by itself is very popular right now, and it fits very well with American culture where I want to be happier, I want to do a better job. It's used with hedge fund managers, it's used with Marines. So that's why I'm only interested in mindful kindness. If someone says they're having trouble with it, it may be that they're not really interested. If they're just saying it doesn't work, that's different than them saying, I'm having a hard time. I mean, do you have any idea what might be going on? Those are two totally different things. Someone who's, I'm not interested, as opposed to someone who's trying to figure it out. If they're not interested, they're not interested. It's okay.
Do you have like some like synonyms like to use instead of like kindness? Because I find you use kindness to represent like a big chunk of meaning, but I doesn't like feel like it's like 100% like compatible like meaning and the word kindness.
So, I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear all that. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wonder like if you can use like other words to describe this.
Oh, other than kindness?
Yeah.
Yeah, kindness is it's not a popular word actually. And as I said, I combine altruism, generosity, those are words you can use that get at kindness. Being caring, that's probably a good safe phrase.
Compassion?
Pardon?
Compassion?
Yeah,
That's what we have.
I don't focus on the word compassion for this reason. Compassion is a feeling, kindness is a behavior. So, and as I said, compassion is necessary for genuine kindness, but I'm more interested in it leading to the behavior.
Well, thank you for this eye-opening and coming there soon. Oh, and then right here we have his books available, and then we also have BASO, the Behavior Analysis Student Organization. There's a donation jar, and you can sign up for membership for just $10, and there's a lot of perks with that as well, and we have stickers and everything for sale, as well as Dr. Carnine. So thank you all so much. Enjoy your afternoon.